Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to those online as well. Some of you are taking notes, and so my teacher thing came into play. So I ask if you would mind writing a line on your paper down the center so you can take notes. And this is a very interactive message, so it's also not what I know, but it's what you know as well. So let the Spirit move us, and let's get to this. I'd encourage you to take your own notes following along with me. So please turn to Genesis 37 if you have a Bible, and we're going to talk about lessons that we learned from Joseph. Come at this from a different angle and see where we go. So part of this is me and part of this is you. So enjoy this opportunity. So we're in Genesis 37, and right away we're introduced to Joseph. And I'm not going to read the entire account because we are pretty good with this, and you have the opportunity to do that on your own as you wish. We will hit a few high points as we get through this. Jacob continued to live in the land there were occupied, where his father had journeyed into the territory of Canaan. Verse 2, this is a record of Jacob's descendants, and then he lists the sons. And Israel, verse 3, was Joseph, and he was loved more than the rest of his brothers. And we're not going to detail all of that except to say that he got that cool coat from his dad. But anyway, verse 5, right away, Joseph, verse 4, he told on his brothers. He told on his brothers all the time. But he got that coat too, so there's a twofold thing here. Joseph gave a bad report to his dad about his brothers, so he was a tattletale. But he also, and I don't understand all of the interaction with that, but we know that worked out well for him because he got that coat, that cool coat. And so when I read things, and this is what I want you to do, so I'm going to demonstrate this first, and then I will ask you to do so as we move through this. But as I read things, I'm also reminded of other scriptures that remind me of things. And so I was reminded when I was reading this first little part of Proverbs 16, verse 18. And Proverbs 16:18 says, pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. And I think, wow, that kind of spells out the way Joseph's life kind of went there right after he began to have conflict with his brothers. And then I immediately thought of Proverbs 11:2, which also says, when pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom. And I think, wow, that's a really good lesson for me. So again, I'm wrapping this up in a title called Lessons from Joseph, but it's not necessarily me trying to get you to learn lessons. It's me sharing lessons that I received through a quick study of this. So those are my two scriptures. So what I would do is I would write Genesis 37 over on one side, and then I would write those scriptures over on the other side. And I encourage you to write scriptures that come to your mind as we read through this. And so what you're doing is creating your own Bible study and your own lessons from Joseph. See how that works? It's kind of interesting. I'm not expecting you to share this with me or to use it as homework and I'll see you next week or anything like that. This is purely just a constructive opportunity for each and every one of us to do things. And if you're not taking notes, then I hope you're also letting your mind engage and find things as well that come to mind while you're doing this. So we'll quickly move on to verse 5, where he has the dream, and then he tells his brothers the dream. We're not going to detail all of that again, just hitting the high points. But I think it's interesting. You can look at this in a lot of different ways, and one of the ways that I looked at it was as a child, we all have dreams and aspirations. We want that cool car. We want to marry that beautiful lady or that handsome guy, and all these different dreams and aspirations that we have in life. And then slowly as we make our way through life, we realize that those were kind of too much. People in our lives go, I can't believe you got these fanciful dreams and you want to do things that are really not attainable. And I say that because sometimes they aren't attainable. Like the house with 35 bedrooms and 25 bathrooms is probably not a really good idea for a lot of reasons. I mean, think of having to clean that, first of all. That's the problem. We don't really analyze our own dreams to determine what's a good idea and what isn't. We just kind of live through things like that. Because as a child, I can remember the elementary teacher would say, hey, write down something that you hope to do in your lifetime. And it's, well, I want to go to the moon, or I want to go to whatever, or do whatever. That's kind of fanciful thinking unless you actually are focused on doing something similar to that. So in this case, Joseph had dreams and aspirations, but they were prophetic. So this is a different idea. But the problem with that is you run into your brothers in this situation. And so it reminded me of James 1:5. And James 1:5 says, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to him. And I think that's the first thing that Joseph needed, was just a tad of wisdom in dealing with his brothers like that. I'm pretty sure he said, guess what? Hey, I had a dream, and you guys, you're going to have to serve me. And it didn't come across real well because he's not very good as a teenager of sharing that kind of information. So he should have had a little more wisdom. It also reminded me of 1 Samuel 28, verse 15, where Samuel said to Saul, why have you disturbed me by bringing me up? I'm in great distress, said Saul. The Philistines are fighting against me, and God has departed from me. He no longer answers me, either by prophets or by dreams, so I have called on you to tell me what to do. And I think that's an interesting way to look at dreams if you're getting information from God. So he felt, in this case, Saul felt like he was cut off, if you will. And so we have a dream over here, and we know God was talking to Joseph, but Joseph wasn't doing a very good job of controlling what was coming out of his mouth or how he was handling this sort of thing. So we can learn from that. Romans 12:18 is another one that I thought of. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. It certainly created a difficult situation, Joseph and his brothers, by talking about these things. Of course, we don't know the entire thing, but he kind of seemed to be a rabble-rouser and someone who was poking the bear, if you will, and it came back to bite him, obviously. And in Isaiah 41:10, I'm reminded, don't be afraid, for I am with you. Don't be discouraged, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, and I will help you, and I will hold you up with my victorious right hand. I think he was looking for some positive reinforcement from his brothers, but he was going about it in the wrong way, so he didn't really have that wisdom in dealing with that. But then he gets sold into slavery. We go down to Genesis 39, so we skip a lot. Genesis 39, verse 7, that's why sometime later Joseph's masters, we get to a point where Joseph is now second in command below Potiphar, and we get to a point where we go back up just a tad, we can back up to verse 5. He says, from the time he was appointed Joseph to be overseer over his entire household and everything that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian based on Joseph. The Lord blessings rested on Joseph, whether in Potiphar's household or in Potiphar's fields. And then we move to verse 7. That's why sometime later Joseph's master's wife looked straight at Joseph and propositioned him and said, come on, come lay with me. And we know the account. And then he ran. And verse 14, it says, look, my husband brought a Hebrew man in to humiliate me. He came in here because he was going to lie with me, and I screamed. And here's his garments. He left them. Well, I'm immediately thrown into Matthew 10:28, which says, Don't be afraid of those who want to kill your body. They cannot touch your soul. Fear only God who can destroy your body and soul. He was fearful of a situation that was going on here, and it happened more than once, according to what I've read, and he didn't ask God for help in that. Or even Potiphar, for that matter, probably, because he's second in command. He thinks probably he can handle it, right? Why not? Isaiah 41:10 also says, do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God, and I will strengthen you, and I will help you, and I will uphold you with my righteous right hand, which I read already, but I think that comes up again in my thinking as I'm reading through Joseph about how important it was for him to be fearful of the one who was guiding his steps, and it didn't seem like he was really doing so. And then we have Psalm 46, verse 1. It says, God is our refuge and our strength, and ever-present help in trouble. And we sing that song, right? And so you probably did that in your mind as I read it, and that's okay. But I'm thinking as I'm moving through this account how he's not relying on the person who's guiding his steps, and he should be. And I should do the same. And I'm probably guilty too of not doing that so well. I move on to Genesis 40. And in Genesis 40, it says, sometime later, after he's thrown in prison, both the advisors of the king of Egypt, the head chef, and the chief advisor are thrown into jail as well. And Joseph is in charge there. Again, he's in charge. And God keeps throwing these things into his path. I love this. If you're not going to do it right, I'm going to send something to help you along with this. Maybe he was praying for guidance, but he wasn't really paying attention. It'd be like driving down the road and going, God, give me a sign, give me a sign, give me a sign. And you passed by 100 signs that told you to turn right, and you turn left. And then he says, well, I gave you the signs. What in the world? So they have dreams. They have dreams. And I think, wow. I remember somebody smarter than me told me once, if I don't learn from the mistake, I'm going to have another chance to learn from it because it's going to happen again. And I think, well, this dream thing keeps popping up. And I think, well, Joseph didn't get it the first time, so maybe he'll get it the second time, right? So, But we're back to those dreams. It's very interesting. James 1, verses 2 through 4 is something that came up to me. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. And I can remember being a kid, and where I am today, I'm not complete, but I sure have come a long way. And Joseph is getting that opportunity as well. He's like being pushed against that grindstone seemingly every day along this journey to be sharpened and more ready to be God's servant. Then I think of Romans 12:17. It says, do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. And you might think, how does that work into this? And I think because he already had a dream and people sold him into slavery because he told his dream, and then now he had some people come and tell him their dream. He could have actually been pretty hateful to these people. Nobody really thinks about that, but I think, wow, Joseph could have been really fired up about, I can't believe people want to come tell me their dream. See what happened to me and get all mad and get frustrated and get upset. And he didn't. He did actually say, God is the only one that can handle your dream. He did put that out there to kind of give a little bit of credit where credit was due, and that's that God could interpret that dream. But then he did it, which may have been an immediate answering of that kind of prayer thing, where he gives his credit to God, and then God blessed him with the opportunity to be able to do that. We don't really know, do we? We don't know how much time goes by between him hearing the prayer and then him telling him what those meant, which is kind of defeats our understanding and are able to think through that. But that's okay. We can handle it. It'll be all right. So he didn't repay these people with evil like he could have done, because I know I would want to do that. I'd be very upset and still in my feelings and want to tell them to go somewhere else, or guard, come take care of these people, they're annoying me, or something, get them out of my sight. Luke 6:31 is another place that I thought of. Do to others as you would have them do to you, which is exactly what he did. He helped them by guiding them in the understanding of what their dreams meant. And that actually helped the entire country by him doing so, right? So we're getting ahead of ourselves if we do that. Galatians 6:10, therefore, as we have opportunity, we should do good to others. And then Proverbs 20, verse 22 says, do not say, I'll pay back for this wrong. Wait for the Lord, and he will avenge you. So he waited for the Lord anyway, because he was like, he's the only one that can tell you what your dream was, which is good. But then he didn't wait on that avenging thing until it comes later, right? So we're still getting ahead of ourselves. But I really appreciate these scriptures, because people will say, well, the first part of the Bible and the last part of the Bible, they don't go together. So if I read Joseph, it's just the same old story. And I go, but here's the thing. If you're learning and growing in grace and in knowledge of your Lord and Savior, then when you go back and read it again multiple times, you should get more out of it. That's because both of those groups of Bible chapters and books should go together. They should mend together and not be separate, going against each other. So that's where I come from. So I've read this account many times, and I can say that I've gotten different things out of it every time. And so when somebody says, well, I'm going to do a message on Joseph, I don't go, oh, not another one. I go, all right, man, I'm ready. I want to hear some more good information about what I could learn from this. So we move down to Genesis 40, verse 20. Genesis 40, verse 20, and it says, on the third day, which just happened on Pharaoh's birthday, he threw a party for all his servants. He lifted the head of both his senior security advisor and the head of his chef in front of his servants. And that is, he restored his senior security advisor to his former responsibilities, including attending in Pharaoh's personal wine cup. But he beheaded and hanged the head chef, just as Joseph had interpreted those dreams. Despite all of this, the senior security advisor not only didn't remember Joseph, he deliberately forgot him. That's kind of hateful. I'll say it. It's kind of hateful. But I want to say, people are going to let us down. Got to remember that. No matter what, people are in it for themselves. So he was let down. And that's a lesson. Sometimes people are going to let us down. I wrote that twice here because that's how important it is to remember that. Relying on somebody else for something is dangerous because you don't know whether or not they're going to do it. In this day and age, what's the first thing somebody's going to say? I didn't have time. We all have the same amount of time, right? We all have the same amount of time. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365, and unless you travel backwards all the time all around the world, I guess, then you would lose time, right? Or gain time. Anyway, then you get more time or less time. Anyway, that's a science thing. We can save that for another time. So anyway, people do get busy and they forget. And then they also forget the people that help them, which is really bad. So if you're a servant, don't expect to get gratitude from people or to be lifted up because of that by those people, because chances are they aren't going to remember you, which is a lesson as well. Don't do it for others expecting gratitude in return. We do it for our Heavenly Father and for our satisfaction. But we also know that our Heavenly Father doesn't forget, because He says He doesn't forget. And He didn't forget. So we should trust in Him, no matter what. That's where our trust should lie. Because He will deliver us in the time that is right, not in our time, in his time. And he delivered Joseph. So it reminds me of Psalm 118, verse 8. It says, "It is better to take refuge in Yahweh than to trust in man." Wow. I mean, if that doesn't go right along with Joseph's situation there, I don't know what does. And then we have Luke 5, verse 1 through 7. And I'd like to read this account. So Luke 5, 1 through 7. You're welcome to turn there, or you can just listen along. We'll go back to Genesis in a few seconds. So on one occasion, while the crowd was pressing in on our Messiah, on him to hear the word of the Lord, he was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, or something like that, and he saw two boats by the lake. But the fishermen had gone out of them and were washing their nets. Getting into one of the boats, which was Simon's, he asked him to put it out from the land, just a little. And he sat down and he taught the people from the boat. And when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Hey, put out into the deep water and let your nets out to catch." And Simon said, "You know what? We did this all night and we didn't take in anything." And I know what that's like. You go fishing and you're like, "I'm never fishing again. I'm so tired of this. I just wasted however many hours." And that's kind of the way I feel like he felt. I'm done. I'm ready to go home, go to bed, get something to eat, whatever. But he said, "But at your word, I will let down the nets." So, hey, I'm going to do what you asked. No problem. And when he had done this, they enclosed a large number of fish, and their nets were breaking. They signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and they filled both boats so that they began to sink. They took on a ton of water after they took on all those fish. So what's the moral of this story? Trust in the Lord. Yes, very much so. So that's why I wanted to read that whole account. We'll go back to Genesis 41, and we're going to go down to verse 50. Genesis 41, back down to verse 50. I know we're skipping a lot of good stuff, but it's going to be okay. Before the years of the famine arrived, Joseph fathered two sons, Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, the priestess of On. Joseph named his firstborn son Manasseh because he said, "God has made me forget all of my hard life and my father's house." And he named his second son Ephraim because he said, "God has made me fruitful in the land of my troubles." Joseph was blessed with a family. He was blessed with a better job, and he had more responsibility and even more power and authority than anyone in the whole world basically could have possibly imagined that you could have. Which reminds me of 1 Peter 3:9 again. "Do not repay evil for evil or reviling for reviling, but on the contrary, bless. For to this you were called, that you may obtain a blessing." So we could say in him serving those servants and understanding their dreams that he blessed them. And so that could have been wrapped up in part of that blessing that he received right here. He did talk about God blessing him through that. So that's interesting that he actually gives God the credit. And I would say there are a lot of people that would say, and I was one of them, if I read through this account for the first or second time, I would say, I don't think he gave God very much credit after reading through it one or two times, because I'm so focused on the other things that happened to him, and the gravity of each of those situations would overwhelm any of these little words, I will say, like what I just read. That's just the way I feel. And I feel that, I think we feel that way in life too. We get overwhelmed with things. And what do? Now we're bogged down and we're upset and we're discouraged. And where's our focus drifting to? Those things, instead of keeping our focus on our Heavenly Father and the wonderful blessings that He gave us. So another cool lesson right there. Then we drop down to the next part where he gives his brothers the grain. And that's a lot of stuff. I'm really not going to go through all of that. But remember, he put all of their money back in the sacks when he gave them their grain that they had purchased with that money. So to me, that lesson is he had a really quick opportunity right there to do something to his brothers, if he'd been holding on to all of that hatred all those years, right there, he could have repaid them real quickly. And all he had to do was speak, because we know he was second in command. All he would have had to do was speak, just like Potiphar's wife. All she had to do was speak, and Joseph was in the dungeon, basically, which is a lot of power. So it reminds me of Proverbs 18:21, which says, life and death are in the power of the tongue, which is exactly what Joseph had. 1 Peter 3:9, again, 1 Peter 3:9, this comes up a lot with Joseph. Do not repay evil for evil or insult for insult. On the contrary, repay evil with a blessing. And he did that with his brothers too, which he hadn't seen in years. He didn't even know what these kids were like anymore, now that they were a little more grown, right? But he knew they were in the same situation everybody else in the whole country was, where they needed food really badly. Luke 6:31, again, do to others as you would have them do to you. And Galatians 6:10, again, therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people. So you might say there's a little theme running in here, and I didn't do this on purpose. So if this theme is popping up to you, then it was an accident, purely on my part, which I have to give God the glory for. I can't take any of the credit. Let's go to 45, Genesis 45. I'll drop down to 21. So Israel's sons did what they had been asked to do, and Joseph provided wagons for them, and Pharaoh had commanded. He also gave them provisions for the journey. He gave each of them some changes of clothes, but he also gave Benjamin 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of clothes. He sent his father 10 male donkeys loaded with the best of Egyptian goods, and 10 female donkeys loaded with grain, bread, and provisions for his father during the journey. Then Joseph sent his brothers away, and they left for home. And as they were leaving, Joseph admonished them, don't quarrel on the way back, which I find very interesting. I'm just going to segue real quick into that. Why did he think his brothers were going to argue or have issues on the way back home? It's just a little side note for you, because I don't have an answer to that. I just find it interesting that he would be giving some advice to his brothers who he hadn't seen in forever. I don't know. Maybe God told him to tell them, because maybe God knew them really well and realized that maybe Ben and his 300 pieces of silver weren't safe. I don't know. Just a guess. But nonetheless, let's move on. So Joseph's brothers left Egypt, returned to the land of Canaan and to their father Jacob. And then he returned. They all packed everything up. I'll shorten this up because we know this. They pack everything up. They come back into Egypt, and Joseph gets to see his dad. He's reunited with his father, the one that had lost Joseph, who had been killed in his sight. I can't imagine Jacob living all those years believing that his son was dead and then getting reunited with him. But this story isn't just... This account isn't an old story. We've known this story in other places as well, and one of those places is the prodigal son. So I'd like to read that. I'd like to read the prodigal son, which is Luke 15, and this will be in its entirety from verses 20 through 32. So Luke 15, 20 through 32. And he arose and came to his father. And we can visualize Joseph in the similar situation here. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him, and he felt compassion, and he ran and he embraced him. And the son said to his father, Father, I have sinned against heaven and earth. Before you, I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet. And bring the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this is my son who was dead and is now alive. And he was lost, and he is now found. And they began to celebrate. But that's not the end of the story, and that's what's so good about this. That's not the end of the story with Joseph either, once he sees his dad again, as they continue to do great things. But now, verse 25, his older son was in the field, and he came and he drew near to the house, and he heard music and dancing. It's probably that rock and roll that his other brother loved listening to, instead of the nice classical music that his dad was always listening to that really annoyed him, So he knew something was up. He called one of the servants and he asked, and he said, "What in the world? Why do we have this music going on?" And he said to him, "Your brother has come home, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has received him back safe and sound." But he was angry and he refused to go in. His father came out and he entreated him. But he answered his father, "Look, come on, man. I've served you all these years. I've never disobeyed you. Yet you never gave me a party. You don't ever let me listen to the music I like to listen to." But he said, "But when this son of yours came, who took all your property and he threw it away, and he spent time with prostitutes, and you just killed the fatted calf for him." And he said to him, "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours." Now here's the thing. This could have been the first time this boy ever heard that. I don't know, just saying. But it must have made a difference. He said, "It's fitting to celebrate and to be glad, for this is your brother who was dead and is now alive. He was lost and now he's found." And as I get ready to close, I thought it very appropriate to read Deuteronomy 30. Deuteronomy 30, starting in verse 15. Deuteronomy 30, verse 15. "See, I have placed before you today life and happiness, and death and adversity, in that I am commanding you today to love your God, to walk in his ways, and to keep his commandments, his statutes, his judgments, so that you may live and become numerous, and that the Lord your God may bless you in the land where you are entering to take possession of it. But if your heart turns away and you will not obey, but allow yourself to be led astray, and you worship other gods and serve them, I declare to you today that you will certainly perish. You will not prolong your days in the land where you are crossing the Jordan to enter or take possession of it. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today that I have placed before you life and death, the blessing and the cursing. So choose life in order that you may live, you and your descendants, by loving the Lord your God, by obeying his voice, and by holding close to him." And I would say that the biggest lesson I learned from Joseph is the greatest gift that we have been given, and that's life.